Them worked in Microsoft, or they may have lived in the US or Europe, but a lot of them have come back. But most of the new ones are pure India born, educated, India bred entrepreneurs.
And apparently, fintech, you need a local partner, right?
If you want a banking license, yes.
Okay.
If you're going to apply for stuff, yeah.
Yeah. I was just, yeah, we were just discussing, in the African room and just in general, most of, the successful fundraising that happens in Africa tends to be non-Africans. So we were just wondering if it was just a phenomenon that happens somewhere else as well. Um, it is a given that, someone who has connections and networks, like you said, educated outside and things like that, that's common, but it tends to be really a bigger proportion of the successful fundraising and startups. So I was just curious, since you guys seem to be having a lot of unicorns. So thanks.
Jason, in Twitter space, can you count to 5, please? Uh-oh. Keep going.
Cannot hear.
Keep going. There we go.
6,
Yeah,
7,
we got you.
8.
Thank you. Okay, so what are we going to do? Welcome back, everybody. Happy Thursday. And let's jump into it. And indeed, one of the big stories yesterday was that the SpaceX satellites, 40 of them got fried. And I guess those things are going to happen. Out of thousands and thousands of them, I think relatively in the bigger picture of things, not that big of a deal, I guess. And then we got
Tyler,
yes.
I was just gonna say that one of the big things happening is still the Canadian truckers protest. The anti-vaccinations. It really, really is getting bigger, blocking a lot of the trade that happens between the U.S. and Canada. Originally it started because of the mandatory thing. If they are crossing the border between Canada and the US, which is like 70% of the trade, between the two countries. The mandate was like you either have, if you are a trucker crossing, to have a vaccination or quarantine for days, and they didn't want to do that. Um, Even though survey shows that 82 or something like that Canadians are vaccinated and they support all the health measures, but now it's like really spreading into like way beyond even the vaccination, and they are demanding like even to get rid of the mask and other mandatory things, all the health measures, and especially the crossing the bridge. They blocked it like most of the day yesterday between Detroit and Windsor, as well as somewhere I think between Winnipeg and Montana and something like that. So yeah, it was really getting big, and then even Fox News in the U.S. and Ted Cruz, oh, not Ted Cruz, what is that? The Cruz one, um, is also, they are saying they support and that they wish it comes to the U.S. So there you have it. That's the big news around the Canada-U.S. border, and especially in Canada as well.
Because your husband is Canadian, right?
I am actually. I am Canadian, and my husband is American. So yeah,
Ah,
my family and all. I lived most of my life in Canada. I just came back to Ethiopia because originally I was born in Ethiopia. So
cool. Okay, so and by the way, before we get into the top stories for today, Dr. Fran DM'd me a really interesting, humorous one to get us started, which I will pin to the top of the clubhouse room, and hopefully Cheryl can share it to the top of the Twitter space. It's from The Guardian, and the headline says, Russian painting vandalized by a bored art gallery guard who drew eyes on the painting. I love this one. This is, if you've traveled around museums around the world, especially the nice ones, they have security guards protecting the paintings from people doing crazy things to the paintings. And you often wonder, how bored are these security guards who sit and do nothing for 8 hours at a time? And it was inevitable that one of them would snap. And one of them has picked up a pen and drawn on one of the paintings. And I can understand why when you see the painting. If you click on the link at the top of the article, at the top of the Clubhouse room, or at the top of the Twitter space, you'll notice that it was an image of three faces that were totally blank. They have kind of hair, but no eyes or nose or mouth or ears. It's just this blank face. And I assume this must have driven the security guard nuts. I can understand that to some degree. And the security guard drew eyes on the blank faces. Anna Leporskaya's Three Figures is the name of the piece, sent for restoration after a guard doodled on it with a ballpoint pen on his first day at work, by the way. So this guy clearly was just trying to help, basically. He saw an opportunity to improve the painting. On the first day. I mean,
Oh my God,
sounds
the
like
impulse
something
control.
you might do on the last day. But to do that on your first day, I want to interview this guy. I would
Yeah,
love
me too. I
to
want to
ask.
know.
Sorry, I'm pretty sure this was his last day.
The first and last. Is there any scenario where this guy could get off with a warning? Is what I want to know.
No.
Expired already.
I didn't know you couldn't do that.
Nobody told me I couldn't do that. And then the irony is we hired you to stop people from doing precisely
Yes,
that.
that was
Yeah,
his
but
job.
Tyler, that's other people.
His
No one
job
told
was
him
to
that he could.
protect.
That's right. Yeah, I want to hear the conversation that immediately followed the realization that this guy had done this, where he says, "What's the problem?" And they say, "Well, we didn't." He goes, "I read,
The interviews
I,
he gave,
I,
he was
I,
like, "Okay, you are being hired to protect these paintings." And
I read
next
the
day, what
handbook."
does he do?
No.
I
Last
think
night,
the person who hired him is going to be in trouble.
I stayed up all night reading the handbook, and at no point did it say I could not draw on the painting. So the piece of art is worth about $1 million, or it was. It was on display as part of an abstract art exhibit at the Boris Yeltsin Presidential Center when the guard drew eyes on it with a ballpoint pen. Alexander Drozdov, the executive director of the Yeltsin Center, did not identify the security guard in a statement, but said he worked for a private security company and had been fired. What? He was fired. The exhibition's curator said the painting was vandalized with a Yeltsin Center branded pen. Well, that was your problem right there. What are you doing giving away pens at the center at an art museum? I mean, you're kind of begging for problems, right? Quote, his motives are still unknown, but the administration believes it was some kind of lapsed insanity, she said.
You think so?
Yep,
You think?
the ink has slightly penetrated into the paint layer since the titanium white used to paint the faces is not covered with author's varnish. It is often the case in abstract painting of the time, blah, blah, blah. Fortunately, the vandal drew with a pen without strong pressure. Good technique. And therefore, the relief of the strokes as a whole was not disturbed. The left figure is also has a small crumble of paint layer. The vandalism was first noticed on December 7 by two visitors who raised the alarm with gallery employees. The painting was removed from the exhibition and returned to the State Gallery in Moscow, which had loaned the painting. Restoration experts they've estimated the restoration work will cost about 250,000 rubles.
I believe this may raise the value of the painting later on.
Suspect faces a fine and up to 3 months in prison. The Yeltsin Center has since installed protective screens over the remaining works in the exhibition. This is not the first time a painting has been vandalized in Russia. In 2019, a man was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison after attacking a painting of Ivan the Terrible tearing it up with a pole from a barrier protecting the work. The same work was also attacked in 1913 by a mentally ill man who slashed it with a knife 3 times. Wow. That's quite a provocative piece of work. So I am, in fairness, reflecting as somebody who owns a resort in Thailand, which Thailand happens to be one of the places where Russians can travel, and with relative ease. So Thailand gets a fair share of Russian tourists, and it's a common topic of conversation amongst resort owners of Thailand that Russian guests uniquely feel entitled to do whatever they want with your pool, with your with all of your possessions of your resort. They will take your beach chairs to other beaches and maybe even home and all kinds of crazy fun shenanigans. So that's just the thought that's going through my head as this guy felt. And, and by the way, when you have Russian tourists jumping in your private swimming pool and you ask them to, what are they doing? They'll, in every instance, and I mean out of hundreds, without fail, every time they'll say, why? What's the problem? Why can't I swim in the pool? And you say, well, it's a private pool. Yeah, okay, so why can't I swim in it? No one was swimming in it. It needs swimming in. That's why you made it, right? So anyway, I'm just imagining how this person's responding in this scenario. Well, what's the problem? Nobody, I thought, what's the big deal? So thank you for that one, Dr. Fran, for starting us off with that rather lighthearted story. So, and then the next, somebody else, Tan, also shared one, which happens to be the top story of today, which is a follow-up of one of the top stories yesterday. And everyone, those of you who join us every day, which is, I gotta say, a lot of folks join us every day, which is why this works so well. You guys will remember there was the crypto couple that was caught trying to launder billions of dollars, somewhere in the neighborhood of around $4 billion of Bitcoins. And there's an update today from Bloomberg that says how the update is how they were caught, because we didn't know how they were caught. That was one of the questions somebody on stage had asked, if I remember correctly. Yes, somebody said, how did they get caught? Well, Bloomberg has the story, how the feds caught Heather Morgan and Ilya Lichtenstein as they allegedly attempted, rather sloppily, to launder Bitcoin from the Bitfinex hack. And that was kind of what Ben said yesterday, was what the hell were you thinking? And, well, separately, how did you not secure your loot in a way that would prevent anyone from removing it from you? So clearly they were not following proper kind of hygiene, crypto hygiene, which they could have done a much better job. Even as the headline says, they were doing the laundering in a very sloppy way. Clearly they should have pursued other avenues, and they should have been a little bit about protecting it so that the authorities couldn't force them to return it, so to speak, because they were holding it in online wallet, kind of hot wallets, so to speak, which are ascertainable, for lack of a better word. So that's the update, where Bloomberg goes into the details about how they were caught. Yeah, a lot of people writing about it. Here's the Wall Street Journal's version, because it says how the feds tracked down 3.6 billion in stolen Bitcoin. U.S. government said the couple acted to break up crypto transactions to make them harder to track. United States government Bitcoin bust this week appears to reflect its success 5 years ago in disrupting some operations used by criminals to launder stolen funds. The Justice Department said it executed a search warrant last week and seized 94,000 Bitcoins from the online wallets of two alleged money launderers. Now, the main words in that sentence is online wallets. That was their first mistake, as Ben correctly pointed out. What the hell are you doing keeping billions of dollars of Bitcoins in online wallets? What on earth are you thinking?
They're not thinking.
They clearly weren't thinking. That's like ABCs of what not to do. That's like robbing a bank and then keeping the money in a bank account, like that could, the authorities could then remove from you. The seized Bitcoin allegedly comprised of the bulk of 120,000 Bitcoins. According to the federal government's complaint, the couple moved the stolen funds through sites such as AlphaPay. We knew that yesterday. And the couple haven't been charged with the original theft. As part of the internet accessible only through special browsers designed to hide identities, the services called mixers used to break up cryptocurrency transactions to make them harder to track. They set up fictitious accounts with unhosted wallets and at about 10 other cryptocurrency exchanges using numerous email addresses. So they were basically just trying to obfuscate their identity with email addresses and burner phones, and they thought that that would be enough. And it turns out it's not when it really comes down to it. So anyway, now they're paying the price. Wow. They could have got away. The crazy thing is, if they had just employed a little more savviness, they actually could have gotten away with it. That's the weird part. And that's huge. $4 billion? Jesus Christ, what eyes. Holy cow. Anyhow, so the second biggest story of the day, the second biggest topic of the day, is from the Washington Post. It says, in a bid to appease lawmakers and regulators, Microsoft outlines 11 App Store principles, including equal treatment and allowing third-party payment processing. Oh, snap. Look at Microsoft flexing and flossing and kicking dust all over Apple and showing, hey, what's the problem? Why don't you allow third-party payments for the app developers? What ain't no thing but a chicken wing. What's going on, Apple and Google? So obviously this is going to make Apple and Google incredibly angry that Microsoft is doing what all the lawyers are telling Apple they need to do. And Apple's clearly resisting with its full force. And then Microsoft is just going ahead and doing it. It's kind of a funny thing. So that's kind of the bulk of that story. The third topic is that it's a story that we covered yesterday before it was even a big story, but now today it's a bigger story. References to quote-unquote reality OS appear to have briefly shown up again in Apple's code, this time in a GitHub. Oh, so this is an update on that. So yesterday, JT found a story about the reality operating system, which ostensibly the reason this is so exciting is because this is hard evidence that Apple's working on AR or VR, and because they're making the operating system for it, obviously. And it's called Reality OS. I mean, it's in the code. So this is now a second new proof point that they're doing this, and this time it's in GitHub. Reports of a new AR headset operating system. Long rumored Apple headset could have a new operating system. No, not could. We now know that it does. We even know the name of it. So Apple's long rumored virtual and augmented reality headset might be just around the corner because the operating system already has a name. And the question is when. And as JT said yesterday, there is an event coming up. What is it? March 8th, is it? Is it that soon already, JT?
Well, that's sort of the pre-spring event where they're just going to announce like new hardware, a couple of devices here and there, but that's not the WWDC that comes a little later, later in the spring.
Right. So, it's not expected that they'll announce necessarily, although they might do something because they clearly are trying to slow down Facebook's momentum and Facebook's head start that they have on selling the Oculus headset that anyone could go out and buy right now and start using today. And clearly, Apple has an interest in letting everyone know that they've got something coming out, because if you know Apple's got something coming out, that's enough to prevent you from buying the Facebook one. And they want to do exactly that. They've been doing that. They've been leaking stuff the day before Black Friday, clearly in an effort to discourage people from jumping into the Oculus ecosystem because they want you in their Apple ecosystem. So I'm willing to bet that they actually do something at this March 8th event that just wets people's beaks just enough, just a little bit, just some kind of. I don't know what that would be without letting too much of it out of the bag. You know what I'm saying, JT?
Yeah, that would be nice. There was some like speculation, on the what do you call those emojis? Their version of the emojis, the 3D version, where like some of them are wearing glasses, and those were like speculation around whether they were going to release an announcement or something along that line. So yeah, you could always, I guess, make some kind of reference to it. I doubt they're going to make any form of like official announcement. They might like subliminally incorporate something hidden within a message or a character, and then like a savvy person has to go and find it and make speculation around that. But yeah, that's my. I think that this March 8th event is really more targeted toward their lower premium devices, and then an announcement around I guess, the rebirth of the MacBook Pro, or not the MacBook Pro, the Mac Pro, which I think died off last season, um, and some other devices that died off as well. But yeah, I think just from like the Reality OS component, that's definitely very important because, as we know, from their competitor, which is Meta, at the moment, there was sort of like rumors that they were dropping their operating system, and then we found out that that wasn't true. And obviously, Apple wants to get a stronghold over not only the operating system but the entire the entire sort of like data collection ecosystem, so they can have leverage over other platforms or other companies that might be going through um, their own proprietary sort of ecosystem. And so, one of the cool things that I guess the developers that were reading the code here is that this ROS has a line of code that involves some form of simulator. So that simulator would allow, I guess, their internal developers or whoever they trust as seeing sort of a first glance at the Reality operating system to do some form of prototyping. They also have the WebXR API that was, I guess, discovered in another form of code that connects the iPhone to the headset, so they can play around with that as well. So I think giving, I guess, their internal developers a first glance and a first sort of testing playground is the first step, to in a direction where we'll start to see some form of, I guess, good prototypes moving forward. Because what they're planning to create in terms of something that really hasn't hit the news, but all of this, the ROS, what I'm going to talk about is the RI, the reality interface. This was all written in their patents, but most people don't want to go into those things and read them. But this was outlined going back all the way to 2017. I think Bloomberg had reported on this, and they just resurfaced them even more as they update their patents. But their reality interface is going to be something that they describe as very innovative and very sort of out of the 2D spectrum or realm that we're accustomed to.
Okay.
Another key part of this to really watch very closely, Tyler,
Yeah.
is going to be, this is David over in Clubhouse, is going to be just how they put maybe a second of the 1-2 punch regarding the privacy, all of all of that, all the privacy features, enabling users to kind of opt out of all of the kind of behind the scenes privacy things. That's gonna be the data privacy. That's gonna be very interesting because they already have been doing lots of commercials trying to educate the public on it as well. So if their platform, which of course it'll likely just be in tune with all of that strategy, that would be a very interesting measure to see if the public is really getting educated on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one question for JT possibly as well. This is Tina on the Clubhouse side. JT, did you notice maybe 2 days ago now, Charlie Fink put out like a quick, is this real? Which was I'm not sure if it's YouTube or I can probably retweet it if nobody's seen it. And nobody really answered him, which I thought was interesting. And he even tagged Scoble in it. And it was an image or like a quick um, 30-second clip of what looks like Apple branded glasses, like maybe AR glasses, like maybe not. I know we're all looking at some kind of headgear or something, and that's something that I've seen a lot of posts that you've put out, but nobody's ever really sort of approached the idea as Apple getting into like the AR um, glasses like Facebook's done or like Snap does. Is there any like scuttlebutt about that or rumor about that you've heard? Or has anybody got any thoughts on that? That maybe that's something that they might talk about?
Yeah, that's a much longer term um, product. Their initial rollout supposedly is going to be an MR device, leading up to a more robust AR lightweight glasses. But that's sort of the vision, right? Of this industry is to get from bulky to less bulky. And so yeah, we have like Snapchat with their closed beta spectacles. We have Nreal, which is the only AR consumer glasses available on the market at the moment, even though it's under Verizon. Um, and so we have as well Meta, planning to release sometime in the next 2 to 3 years, probably within that time frame, I would say. Their project, it's either Aria or Nazari, one of those. I forgot which name they're going after. But yeah, Apple's AR glasses. There's been references to that in articles in their patents. They're terming the name glass, but we really haven't heard much about it. It's mainly been around the HMD, the mixed reality component going from AR to VR, and most of the rumors are sort of revolving around that. Most of the leaks are revolving around that specifically, but the AR glasses component definitely has to be on their product roadmap. This is where you take sort of the utility and the functionality of being able to go actually outside into the actual physical world and experience augmented reality. In your actual real world, right, while you're traversing, whether that's through AR navigation or through being able to see products in your actual environment, being able to use machine learning, which they have a very robust data set, and the ability to actually scan buildings and objects. They have object detection, text detection, recognition, I should say, and so all that utility aspect comes into play when you're talking about AR glasses. When you're talking about MR, the AR VR component, they seem to be more targeting sort of the entertainment and content component, where you would be either at home or in the office or in the coffee shop, and you want to experience their entire library of proprietary content. So this is why I keep saying that content is now, content as king is going to become more elevated than ever, because what we just recently heard from Nreal is that they made a partnership with a company called, can never pronounce it, I think it's pronounced Cinegym, which allows you to watch uh, channels, essentially content from their channels, horror, sci-fi, sports, using your mixed reality glasses. And so you're able to move the actual content in your environment, you're able to have multiple screens. So Apple's definitely, targeting that realm, because they would be silly not to target that realm, especially since that's where I guess the digital content or money comes from: music, right, video, podcasting, etc., etc. And so that's where the MR device comes into play. But the augmented reality, yeah, that's definitely more in line with their AR glasses, which is definitely down the road. And we're probably not going to see that in the next year or two.
Okay. The next topic is from CNBC that Binance is investing $200 million in Forbes to help the publisher with its plan to merge with a SPAC in Q1. That's kind of wild. I didn't see that one coming. Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, is making a $200 million strategic investment in Forbes, the 104-year-old magazine and digital publisher, CNBC has learned. And then CZ of Binance, who's the chief potato head there, he says, invest in both new and old and bridge them with crypto. Binance taking $200 million stake in Forbes. And Alex on Twitter, which is @Alex on Twitter, says, I really don't get it. And that's a little bit of a head scratcher. PT, what does he have to say? The next great crypto hacker and rapper extraordinaire will be on our team helping us harden our system. Anyway, very interesting move. So the next is also from CNBC, that Twitter did their quarter earnings report, and Twitter misses as Q4 revenue rose 22% year over year to 1.7 billion. I'm sorry, 1.57 billion. Net income dropped to 182 million. That's bad when your income drops. Monthly daily active users hit 217 million, up from 192 million a year ago. So that means they added, what is that? 17 plus 8, 25 million users, which is, I'm surprised that Twitter usership is still not way more than that, considering how big the other social
Those are daily users.
monthly daily active users. That's right. Fair enough. Fiscal year 221 revenue rose 37%. Blah blah blah. So not a stellar breakout year for Twitter, as it could be. Anyway, we'll see, because they've got a lot of new products and features coming up, and let's see how people respond to those. So the next one is from The Verge, that YouTube details updates for creators. If you joined me yesterday, you heard me bragging yet again that I was the first official YouTube creator. That's a whole other separate story that we'll save again for another time. However, YouTube has been a leader in the creator economy, and they have additional updates for creators, new editing and monetization tools for shorts. Now that's hot. That's hot. Do you hear that cash? Did somebody just hear a sound? Did you hear a cash register sound? I heard a cash register sound. That's the sound of creators getting paid to make TikTok videos on YouTube. That's huge. This is really big. And because Facebook and Snapchat and everybody's trying to figure out how to stop the bludgeoning of TikTok kicking everybody's ass. And YouTube just figured it out with this move right here. Here's what happened. This is potentially a big game changer, because the TikTokers are making short little 1 minute, 2 minute videos. And YouTube has a lot of people that make a lot of videos, generally more of the horizontal variety, where TikTok is more of the vertical variety. And the TikTokers generally aren't being paid in the same way that the YouTube content creators are, because YouTube has all of the ads that you watch, that you sit through and then skip over and whatever, right? You don't do that as often in TikTok. Well, that's some of that money is going to the content creators. So if YouTube is able to offer TikTokers real hard money to put that content on YouTube, they'll do it. And that's kind of common sense. And that's what they're now enabling, is monetization for short, little 1 minute vertical TikTok-like videos. They're also expanding shopping across the YouTube app. Oh, wow. What a surprise. What? Shopping in YouTube? Yeah, that's huge. That is so incredibly, unbelievably, almost unimaginably big, because people are trying to shop on YouTube, but there's no button to click buy. And if there was, they would click it, because They're clicking the buy button on Amazon. But Amazon doesn't have videos, and when you go to Amazon and you think you want to click the buy button, 5 times out of 10, you go over to YouTube and search for it over there to see videos of what that item really looks and feels and smells like. Well, guess what? What if you could buy the object right in YouTube? And what if all those people, by the way, now this is where it gets truly insane. There are endless, countless, hundreds of videos for every product you could ever imagine in YouTube of people opening the box. Those people opening those unboxings of every product you can ever dream of, every SKU number in the universe has dozens of unboxing videos in YouTube. And those people who are doing those unboxing videos are getting money from the little ad that we were just talking about that you skip over at the beginning of the video. Now, they make enough money from that ad that it's worth their time to make a career out of doing unboxing videos. Now, what happens when they can put a goddamn buy button and you purchase that item while watching that video, and that person who did that unboxing video makes, instead of 3 cents, makes 30 goddamn dollars from that buy button? Now we're talking huge, huge, seismic, biblical change of e-commerce, where the purchase moves from Amazon to YouTube because it's just a better platform for engaging with the objects that you are intending to buy. Yes, May, go ahead.
Tyler, it's MA in Clubhouse Stage. It's really interesting because you've been talking about this for like over 6 months. I mean, like literally the YouTube screen could actually allow for those unboxing videos to actually be clearly seen. And I think that's going to be very interesting as well because it allows for a better experience, in my opinion, than kind of holding it on your phone, right? Because at least now it's on a horizontal, and at least then you could actually see the product being unboxed. You could see some of the elements that someone like a brand would want you to see. Like especially if the packaging is really special, you know, you don't have that freedom with a vertical on an iPhone or an Android. You don't have that freedom. And sometimes, a lot of times, they'll just throw it to the side, but they'll focus on the product. But what if the packaging is also part of the experience?
Right, but I'm just saying, how weird is it that these people are doing all these unboxing videos, making relative money for doing that without actually selling the actual items? And now they're going to
well, that's kind of what it is. I guess so what is the micro influencer? What is the influencer? Right. Because that's really what they're doing. They're just unboxing, but whether people buy or not, it's not really interesting yet.
Right. But now that people can actually sell stuff on YouTube instead of getting the money from the little ad before the video, oh my dear sweet Jesus, you're going to see every product. People are going to be going berserk selling stuff on YouTube because they're going to be able to sell the thing around. And by the way, we already know YouTube already said, we watched it live when it happened, that the company in the background that's enabling that is Shopify. So what's interesting...
But Tyler, not to interrupt you, but Shopify is also looking at NFTs. So that's going to be a very interesting strategy as well. If Shopify is going to be able to be, I mean, that's definitely like an interweb of sale right in there.
Right. Well, it means they could also sell virtual items in addition to physical items. But
cross-functionally, of course.
There's another interesting element here, and I know this because I was a YouTube content creator for many years, which is, as in the YouTube content creator dashboard, for lack of a better word, content management system, CMS, the content creators will be able to retroactively go back to their back catalog of hundreds or thousands of videos and put buy buttons on all of those previous videos that they previously did of all of those previous products. So you don't have to remake all of those videos. Do you understand that they're going to do that?
I don't think there's enough cash registers downs to cover that.
There's not. YouTube is now going to become a massive e-commerce platform. Massive, like one of the biggest. And this is the biggest competition to Amazon, short of Shopify, yet. That's how big it is. Amazon just got a massive competitor in the form of YouTube via Shopify. And TikTok just got their first real competitor because YouTube figured out how to properly incentivize content creators to do their content creation on YouTube by this crazy thing called paying them. So, which we already know work, which we have plenty of evidence to.
Tyler, this is Tan. You do know that YouTube is actually the second most popular search engine
Yeah,
on the internet.
not only is it the second most popular search engine, it ranks really high in the social network rankings as well. It's already doing fine relatively to all the other social networks, and these two moves are not. I mean, they have major impact. They're going to have major impact on the annual revenues. It's going to have major impact on the metrics, but they are relatively light changes to the platform. It's not fundamentally difficult to do what they're doing here, but it's going to have a tremendous impact. So kudos
How
to
about how about their logistics, Tyler? Like, I mean, Amazon's
Shopify.
really competitive
Right.
edge is usually figuring out quite well their logistics,
Yeah.
right? So these platforms, yes, YouTube has really, really well built-in users and search and all that, but they don't really have the logistics, right?
Shopify is improving, and Amazon had a decade head start, and Shopify isn't terrible, and they're constantly improving and coming up with their own alternatives. Although that is Amazon's strength, I would say. And it's amazing looking at Amazon's shopping experience of 5, stock photos of an object. That's fine for
Tyler.
toothpaste or toothbrushes or whatever. It's still far inferior to YouTube for the vast majority of products. Yeah, MA.
Tyler, the one interesting thing from a supply chain and a fulfillment perspective, as Messi was saying, I think Google's for the win for sure, because if you recognize one thing about fulfillment from the supply chain is localization of the product. So if YouTuber has the possibility of promoting or having those products on their YouTube, right, their YouTube short, that happens to be product that's imported from Europe, let's just say, like makeup, okay? Let's just say it's makeup. That actually could be very interesting in terms of fulfillment of that product, because if the YouTuber is doing a product and it's fulfilled internationally and it's seen on YouTube, it could actually post them and push them to the international site, which means it could actually cut down on shipping costs from where the person would get the product shipped from. It could even make it that the brands themselves would be like, oh, maybe we need to kind of align with this and make it part of our omni-channel solution, because that's your direct-to-consumer right there. And that's just another channel of distribution. In my eyes, as an omni-channel manager, I would see that as a great conduit to getting influencers to sell my product on YouTube's without me having to worry about it being fulfilled with any middlemen, because the influencers doing their job, and it's like virtual salespeople.
So to build on your great point,
and that would make affiliates. That would make, sorry, Ben, that would make like an affiliate option as well, where not only could they be paid by YouTube, but they could also be paid a small percentage of commission by the company.
And YouTube, Google, of course, have got Google Shopping, which has already got a huge database of SKUs.
Correct.
Fairly well duplicated.
Yep.
With shipping information localized to multiple countries. So obviously
Google for the win.
But this is a massive
I
asset.
think it's Google for the win.
Well, I mean, Google does have a lot of data that they can leverage to match the buyers and the sellers.
We could go back to the lever of we could go back to JT and metaverse love as well. If you just imagine metaverse commerce, and if you could just take it there and we go down that little rabbit hole for a moment, I mean, that's game changing. That's game changing, because they literally could, I mean, Google comes out with glasses. Google's going to do a whole bunch of technological stuff. Could you imagine the interoperability of being able to not only have e-commerce, omni-channel, but now meta-commerce? Game changing, completely game changing. And I agree with Ben, if they're already holding all the data and they've got all this information, juicy information at their hands, I mean, come on. I see it as Google for the win, because Amazon doesn't have the flip side of the influencers. They have their small business, they have their supplier, their seller portal, but they don't really have influencers.
But I think, I mean, I don't want to be the naysayer, but like I said earlier in this room, I think as humans, social beings, we will still have the big part of our life in outside of the metaverse. You know, my husband is not
Oh,
gonna get a
agreed.
gift for his birthday,
No,
some
agreed,
metaverse
Mezzi.
gift.
But from a
And
strategic perspective, the
right,
metaverse would not be there for someone to shop in it. For
right.
example, the metaverse is there to allow people to even view shopping or pre-shopping or private exclusive shopping, which would mean the possibility of actually getting products before it's released to the customers, especially if it's a pre-release, which happens a lot because I've worked in the fashion industry and in the luxury and health and beauty. When you start looking at Estee Lauder and you start looking at many of these big brands, they do get products that are just literally sold out in like minutes. So if their supply chain would ever get challenged, this would give the opportunity to create loyalty of a consumer base in every channel possible. Not that your husband or everyone would be running to the metaverse, but if you look at the new set of consumers, that is where they're going. And I keep on saying we have to really look at the future, 10 to 15 years ahead, to see where
But
people will be shopping.
yeah, Emmy, but I think one of the things I remember, like when Amazon was really, really good at getting the Prime. I remember Prime, 85% of the US households are Prime members. And when it was coming in, a lot of people would do window shopping and go Amazon and order it on Amazon and then get it to their delivery. Nowadays, they are even doing 1 day delivery, which is insane to me.
Yeah, they're
So
doing
what
4 hour delivery, Mezzi, in New York. I mean,
exactly,
Two
that's
hours.
crazy.
exactly. So
Sorry,
people
David,
could
2 hours.
exactly. So I think they really, really, like Tyler said, they're way ahead in the logistics sector, and people are spoiled. I couldn't even wait like 3 days. You know, I'm too
I
lazy
love
to
it. Messi's
order the
like, I
bird.
can't wait 3 days. I want it in 2 hours.
No, no, no. It's because I am too lazy to buy birthday gifts and things like that. And then I wake up 2 days before the birthday. And then now I'm spending 24 hours looking around on Amazon. And then it just gets here in 1 day. And that's one of the things I go crazy coming back to Ethiopia, right? I can't get those, last minute gifts and things
This
like
will
that.
be this will be
There's
an
a
I think this will be an interesting trend to watch, Tyler, because now that the pandemic and everyone's just saying bafangul to like all the lockdowns and the QR codes right now because it's really quite an interesting
Right.
experience.
So to
But the
me, is
fact that
that
now
the meta?
people yeah,
Yeah.
but what Messi you're saying is valid. Now that people have the opportunity to get out of the house freely. And what's going to happen with the impact of all these deliveries that are delivering groceries? Because people couldn't go to the stores and people couldn't go out. So I'm quite interested to see how that's going to flip the script on the whole sort of shopping experience, whether it be like Uber or like any of the others, Amazon. I'm just curious. I'm curious to see
Could
what's
I
going to
just
happen in the next few
I
months.
think
One
if
could
word,
I could I
everybody,
Cosmo
could I
with a
just
Oh,
K.
one at a time. Sorry. Who was that?
this John just a quick
Hey, John.
question before we and love how you're thinking about this, but before we leave the whole YouTube issue, um, if you imagine that not too far off as I believe will happen, access to the metaverse is really pervasive. It's just in schools, it's at work, it's everywhere. Um, what about a micro metaverse is manifest on YouTube? So rather than being an immersive experience and experiencing social commerce in that context, what if when you search on something in YouTube, you actually end up with a short metaverse experience, a micro metaverse experience in the context of social commerce?
John, I have a bigger question even than that. Poor Lena Khan got on the FTC to try to break up the tech companies. Now that the tech companies have are in the process of switching, every single one of them is switching. Some are switching to more commerce, some are switching to, what it is that they do. How are you going to figure out who or what is a monopoly?
Yeah,
May I add to
Oh,
John's?
thank you, Dr.
Question?
Francine. I totally agree with that, and I think the notion of how to regulate from an FTC perspective of restraint of trade is going to get so unbelievably convoluted because as these experiences converge, breaking apart the components of the experience is undermining the experience itself. So, how do you regulate in the context of the product being the experience, and the experience being the most natural monopoly to ever emerge.
Yeah, and I mean, YouTube allowing its content creators to add that buy button changes what business YouTube is even in. So this is really very fascinating. We need some
Exactly.
very different regulations, and I'm not sure we have people capable of producing them.
Well,
Let's
and
not
it's
forget
cycle time.
that.
The cycle time of innovation is so much faster than the cycle time of regulation that how
Oh yeah,
inextricable
that's
do the components become before the regulators begin to even be? I mean, look at the Senate interviewing the infamous Senate interviewing Mark Zuckerberg. What's your business model, Mark? Sir, we sell ads. You know, in that context, um, it's likely that the metaverse will be built long before the very first understanding of regulation manifests in something that's meaningful, and breaking apart experiences is going to be very difficult.
I think you have to watch like the magician's trick. So I agree with you, John. But if you look at the recent classification by the CMA just one day ago, I think it was, Amazon was designated as a grocer in regulatory crackdown, and I think it should be noted that the way that the technocracy will avoid regulation is by virtue of using the law against the lawmakers, and similar was felt with Microsoft. But ultimately, when you are designated as a grocer, it misses out on the $30 billion you're doing in ad revenue, moving trade, and the revenue you're making from AWS, which is running the internet for the most part now. And ultimately, that is the way that the technocracy will always frame themselves. So Google says, well, compared to the entire advertising industry, we are not a monopoly. And each time it's an argument about classification. And like you say, as we move towards a singularity where Google provides you with your healthcare, your finance, and your social surfacing of information, it's absolutely clear that the regulator will be playing a game of cat and mouse, which is why, yet again, the only real answer is a people-powered solution.
Okay. So the next big topic is it's a bunch of small ones. What's the next one? Kind of back to Dr. Francine Hardaway's point. The not the FTC with Lena Khan, but the CFTC chair, which is Rostin Banam, testified before the Senate Agriculture Committee seeking authority and tools and more funding to bring crypto into the regulatory fold. It's seeking new regulatory authority, technological tools, and major increase in funding to help make crypto a reality through the CFTC. Okay. The next
like
is
it's not a reality now.
That's the aim, to regulate derivatives trading, which for most part is the DeFi business is derivative finance on Ethereum platform. That's I think a clear move there.
And the Bitcoin payment processor called OpenNode raises $20 million. France's data regulator says Google Analytics fails to sufficiently protect EU citizens' data from illegal US government surveillance. Google's analytics doesn't sufficiently protect EU citizens' data from potentially illegal US surveillance and could be banned altogether. So Google Analytics could be banned in the EU. There you go. The next is from
Same as we saw with Facebook saying they were going to pull out of Europe. It's to do with the GDPR, right?
Right. And by the way, the talk in Europe at the moment is, if those of us who have European friends, as I do, as I work in Europe and have for a decade, all the talk is, hey, this is the biggest win-win ever. If we can get Facebook to willingly back out of Europe, this would be a lovely scenario. That's what's blowing in the wind around Europe at the moment. That's the kind of chatter.
Yeah, except for the people who have relatives and friends, in Europe who have become dependent on Facebook for communications.
I'm just saying, based in my social
Yeah.
networks, based in my professional networks, the tonality is they would hope that it works out that way. Anyway, the New York Times wrote a piece called How the Sims, which lets Sims eat or cook 300 plus different dishes, has evolved into a world where players can learn about the many ways people experience food. The 22-year-old life simulation video game Sims has evolved into a world where players can farm, forage, cook, and learn about the many ways people experience food. And the New York Times is writing a piece about that. I'm just imagining the total irony that The Sims could become the place where people learn to rewild themselves and learn how to forage and can build their own off-grid living through. That's just pure delicious irony of the highest form, like learning how to become decoupled and detethered from technology through The Sims. That would be fantastic. Using VR to figure out how to live fully off grid. Yeah, maybe that's my calling in life right there. Building a VR experience for everyone to figure out how to get control of their food and water and energy supplies. So the next is that an Israeli VC firm called CyberStarts, which bets on early-stage cybersecurity startups, has posted a 300% internal rate of return since. This is a slow news day, I have to say, and I've never said that before. The next is Vodafone Portugal is working to recover from a deliberate and malicious attack. Who cares? AMD hits 25% of the market. Who cares? Alfa Romeo. Who cares? Alfa Romeo's joining the endless list of companies that you don't care about that are going to mint NFTs. Who gives a shit? Alfa Romeo is going to do NFTs. Wall Street Journal says they have sources that something called Kobold Metals, which uses AI to find earth metals needed for EVs, raises $192 million. My God, this is the most boring news day I think we've ever had. It is the slowest news day we've ever had. Twilio does their revenue report, up 54% year over year. That's huge. Uber does theirs, rose 83% year over year. It's because they had such a shitty year during COVID that doubling the shitty year during COVID was a cakewalk. And Reddit expands its live audio product. Oh, that's kind of interesting to those of us listening. Reddit expands its
Have
live.
you?
Yeah.
Sorry, just to address your slow news data, have you covered the inflation print? And it just occurred to me, if you hadn't, then your comment about Uber is, indicative of the way that the world is thinking. Because Uber's performance, of course, compared to a terrible year, is enormous. But why are we not perceiving the same in terms of the pandemic? That our growth and our inflation is that same rebound. I didn't know whether you discussed it.
No, haven't. Yeah, there is a headline somewhere today that the inflation rate is 7.5. Which was last seen in '84, I think it was.
Thanks, Biden.
And Tumblr launches a tip jar. Okay, and that's it for the big stories of today. And then we get into the tweets, and there's plenty of tweets, but that was a very unimpressive list of today's biggest stories, I gotta say. So the tweets, we have this Reddit one, which is Reddit's version of Clubhouse, which I'm going to pin to the top of the Clubhouse room, and you can click it, and you can see it's a clone it's a Clubhouse clone. It looks identical to Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, and they barely made any effort to make it look any different at all. Reddit's live audio chat tool will include a way to participate through text and emojis. Reddit said Wednesday that it's adding new features to its live audio product, a sign that the social media site is experimenting with giving users more ways to chat about different topics. The company, which could go public as soon as March, unveiled its live audio chat product called Reddit Talk nearly a year ago in April. Now, Reddit said it'll start highlighting live audio chats at the top of home feeds as part of a test. The feature could make it easier for users to find live audio chats. Users will also be able to listen to recordings of Reddit talks and participate in the chats on the web version of the social media platform. Reddit talk users will be able to use text and emojis during the live audio chat as well. Quote, Reddit is where people come to have conversations about things that they're passionate about, so enabling them to have it in a new multimedia way is really important for us, says somebody who leads consumer and product communications at Reddit. Live audio chatting started to grow in 2020, while who cares? The rising popularity of live audio has also made moderating content such as Reddit allows only moderators in certain communities to start a live audio chat, partly because of content moderation concerns. And they
So
said
this is something that prompts a question, Tyler, is you've obviously have now dual broadcast into Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse. And the reason why one did that, I'm assuming, is that you have a wider, broader distribution on Twitter Spaces. And it seems like every service, every social media service adds audio, and that chat or, talk radio becomes another feature of social media. What do you see happening here? Do you just assume that everything tends towards one, multiple places for different conversations, or do you believe that there's some unifying force?
Can you ask the question again? Because there was multiple answers are swimming through my head, and I want to make sure I answer them.
Okay, so you started building a franchise, Tech News Around the World, which is a fabulous show, and that started on Clubhouse. Then Twitter Spaces, of course, created a clone, which was always the threat, was that once the cool kids left, you would really not have the basis of the audience, whereas Twitter has the basis of the audience already sorted into groups of people discussing things. So it was natural for you to shift over to Spaces as a better, longer term bet. And as other social medias like Facebook and Reddit add the same audio talk radio feature to their social media, do we see that the world gets wider and that this is just a feature of the platform you choose to use? Yeah. Or is there a unifying force that says, why do we need to be on these different channels? Why wouldn't there be a channel where we broadcast everything from ourselves as the unit of value?
So a unifying solution, you mean, that combines everybody instead of everybody building their own?
Like, is everything going to be a conglomerate into winner takes all? I don't know, because I'm trying to figure out where people are going. So our Clubhouse listeners
not necessarily
have
winner
declined.
takes all. The winner might be you, the individual, because the platform becomes ubiquitous because everyone's offering the same thing, basically.
But doesn't that tie into social media as a whole? Like, you use Twitter for certain things, you use Clubhouse for certain things, you use
that's the
Reddit.
point. That is the metaverse, right? It's the point. Sort of trying to illustrate is if your communications are mediated by a device that audio and written word and communications is the platform, at what point do we realize that why does that need to be owned by them? The software, as Andreessen notes, software eats the world, is essentially where we realize that software is infinitely replicable, which is what Clubhouse Spaces have shown. Now the question is where do people go to talk and make sense and come to consensus? Well, it's hard to come to consensus in multiple different places, but if the unit of value is at the individual level and you have the ability to participate in audio and the software is owned by all of us, because there's no reason why you wouldn't have free open source software that can enable us all to drive for Uber, but you don't need Uber. You can just have the people's Uber, and you can prove all of this underlying information. Then you start to realize that that's the singularity where you're effectively merging with the technology. And instead of being, in the old paradigm where corporations control all of that, you emerge out of that paradigm where you say, okay, well, I'm the thing of value contributing to my family, my tribe, my town, my city, my state, my country, and then other people. So you've got this sort of cascade from the individual, but the fundamental unit of household value is the consumption of the family or the household or the individual. And that's what I'm trying to say is, do we see that this, at some point people grok that you can do all the things that software enables, but you don't have to have a company at its core. You can, and you can have multiple services, of course, but you just don't have this giant players. Or do we think that you will go with your favorite giant player?
I think it will be tied to use cases, meaning, and I think the ultimate use case is going to be search. I think if Google results, you do any kind of Google search, and Google, as you know, when you do a Google search, you now get YouTube video recommendations, right? In addition to blog posts. And imagine there was a clickable item at the top of your Google result that said, join a live conversation right now with 500 other people who are talking about that right now live. And many of those might be experts. I imagine Google would be in a great position to coordinate hundreds of thousands, if not millions of rooms concurrently on every topic imaginable. And assuming that ubiquitous kind of environments existed 24 hours per day, and we start to learn very quickly that they do exist all the time, that there's always endless rooms of every topic you could ever imagine, we would go to Google to find those rooms to communicate in. And in some use case, in some searches, with under some search terms, would be best dealt with by blog posts. Other search terms would be better suited for videos, and yet others would be better suited for live conversations with actual people, some of whom might be experts. And the question is how many? Well, we already know the answer to that in the case of video versus text. It turns out that people prefer to go to video somewhere in the order of around 20% of the time. You end up going to videos instead of text. And that's why YouTube is so valuable to Google. And that's why Google bought YouTube. And that's why YouTube became the default winner, because of precisely the phenomenon I'm talking about, where once Google puts their traffic fire hose behind one of the players, in this case YouTube, all of their competitors died instantly. Additionally, with the ability to bundle the ad network into YouTube. The same could happen in social audio very easily if Google either bought Clubhouse or cloned Clubhouse or any other competitor or what have you. And that's partly why YouTube is now very ubiquitous in the amount of content it makes, is because Google drives all the searches there. And I imagine that's how it's going to play out. I imagine that's how social audio is going to play out, is the big use case, similar to YouTube, is going to be servicing search queries, essentially. I mean, YouTube, by the way, YouTube started 2006-07, as you guys know, I was there. And for anyone else who was there, you'll remember YouTube in the early days thought of itself as community. We're all about community, and these community of these users and creators who are talking with each other by making videos to talk to each other. It was like they thought it was like the video version of blogging, where you're talking to your listeners and you're creating communities and all of that. And it's like, do you think of YouTube that way today? I doubt it. And by the way, you won't next year when they start doing all of this social commerce shopping where everyone's selling shit all the time.
So that's an amazing answer. So if I was to paraphrase, it would be search is the most valuable element.
I think so.
And that whoever controls search essentially dictates where the flow goes, and so your general thought is we continue in the same model.
Let me give you part two of the answer. That's the difference. The fundamental difference is Google's, you call it the interest graph, which is they know what you want, as you want it in your real time, or even in some cases before you want it. And that interest graph matches very well, I think, with social audio as a medium. Now, Facebook isn't the interest graph, it's the social graph. Does the social graph line up really well with the social audio as a medium? I don't think so. I think the interest graph, what I'm interested in, is more relevant to having conversations than the people, because I have no problem communicating with the people that I have a social connection to. We're already connected, we're already communicating. There's no real friction there.
So, for example, I'm following you. So, for example, I was interested in the inflation chat in the world, and
Right?
what I would therefore type in would be inflation,
Right.
and it would surface a result of social audio conversations going on that are being passed by AI, and then I would want some sort of ranking of how informed those conversations are, wouldn't
Well,
I?
it gets even better, which is just as Google currently is Google fundamentally is an ad network. What you could very easily do is I Google businesses pay Google to get traffic, right? I'm willing to pay money to get anyone who's interested in X in my business, right? I'm a hot air balloon company. If somebody searches for hot air balloons in San Francisco, I'm willing to pay money for them to see me and for me to connect with them, right? That's fundamentally what Google's business model is. Now, imagine that in the social audio context. Somebody searches for ping pong, lessons. I happen to be a ping pong coach. I'm willing to pay money to be notified when there's a room of more than 10 people who want to talk about ping pong, and I will then join that room. I'm going to pay money to join that room. So,
Can I just? Oh, sorry.
yeah, but once you add in the economics of social audio, of people who have a financial interest in knowing anytime there's a room going on about ping pong, because they make ping pong paddles and tables and whatever, um, shit gets very interesting very quickly, because you're going to have expertise all the time in every room, in hundreds of thousands, millions of rooms concurrently all the time. And it gets even crazier, because all of that content will be voice transcribed, indexed, and searchable. So you'll have live rooms and canonical rooms, meaning previously recorded rooms, that are all searchable, so that Google's future search results will show there's blog posts we can send you to. There is YouTube videos we can send you to. There is live audio rooms that are currently ongoing, and there's historical audio rooms. And here's the part of the historical audio rooms that we think you'll find most interesting. Just like the YouTube videos, they almost become a sister of YouTube videos, where it was a conversation, and at 5 minutes in the conversation, here's the part based on the transcription that is most relevant to your query. So they have historical value, just like YouTube videos do.
Can I just comment very quickly though that like for YouTube, I think that's very interesting. The searchable, indexable, indexed content, I think is a great future use case, particularly as AI advances, and then machine learning will actually just be able to give proper recommendations. But in a recommendation engine, then it's going to be like, what playlist do you want? This is my playlist of hot air balloon searches or whatever. But the thing is, so first with YouTube, I don't actually see it as deviating that much from this idea of community discussions. People address their followers, but there's no return loop, right? So it's one to many, which is most social media, but the many have very limited ability to communicate back. First in real time, but second in general, it's not a conversation, it's a speech. So that's a very different, I think, kind of concept, but it still is a community driven concept, which is I'm talking to you about X, and then the revenue model goes to who's getting a lot of people to listen to, who's got a big community essentially. So the thing with audio, so with any of these things, especially if there is a feedback loop like social audio, the issue is, well, what is a conversation? A conversation is a marketplace of ideas, and marketplaces invariably end up going toward, they have network effects. So you end up having the most and most fruitful conversations in the places where the most people congregate. So therefore you end up having, one main conversation point, the agora of conversations. And then there's like those little side rooms off that are niche conversations where you can generally find regular conversations about particular topics, but not necessarily ones where the people who have the most to say or are most interested in general topics will go towards. So that's the issue really is, are we going to get basically one main conversation source, which is the same thing essentially as YouTube, one main video source. And if you want to supply information to a large group of people, or you want to engage in conversation with a large group of people, you're going to go to more singular sources than anything else. But the issue with marketplaces is they always end up dropping to the lowest common denominator. Whenever the purpose of any marketplace, right, is to appeal to the most people, you end up trading high-end, high-quality conversation or high-end, high-quality exchange of information, ideas, etc., for whatever is most commonly adopted, expressed, etc., which is generally speaking not the highest quality of anything. And you see that happening on Clubhouse and everywhere else, right? It's not about having high-end conversations. A lot of it is essentially generating followers, because followers translate to some sort of power. It's assumed expertise in some particular area. None of it actually it's none of it is factual, right? Vanity metrics, followers, the ability to bring people into your community. None of that means that the content coming out of your mouth or the video that you're producing is of high quality content, however you define that. It just means it's most appealing to people. So the real problem is going to it's the same thing as Google's problem of searching, where if you search for a black dress, it will give you the black dresses that are highest in ranking for people maybe in your demographic, but not the one that's best for you. And that's going to be the same problem in searching conversations, right? It's going to be, generally speaking, what are most people looking at, but that's not necessarily going to be the best, most useful conversations for you. And as individual marketplaces grow, you're going to end up with, again, a bunch, maybe more conversations, but the conversations are more, they become more and more general in nature and more designed to appeal to a large group of people rather than to convey, either controversial ideas in an open discourse, or ideas that are hard for most people to grasp. I don't know that like even if you get a searchable list of information, there isn't a guarantee that that information, even if it's viewed many times or listened to many times, there isn't anything that tells you that the information that you get is going to be quality or informative or even interesting to you. There's nothing to tell you about there's no qualitative assertion there. And that's, and the likelihood as a particular medium grows, the likelihood that any particular instant conversation is going to be a high quality conversation or video or whatever decreases. So
let me drop
I don't have a huge amount of
Okay.
hope for this particular thing.
I got a lot of firsthand information here. So, having tried to create a search engine with Sequoia and Elon Musk, right? One of the things you learn very quickly is that Google understands fundamentally. They were based on traditionally PageRank, which just meant inbound links. It was like a popularity contest of which websites had the most inbound links, and that when you search for dog food, they would send you to the page that had the most people linking to that page with the word dog food as the inbound link. That was PageRank, and that was Google's big innovation for how to organize which pages to send you to. They changed that in 2009 fundamentally into, it was called the Penguin Update, that basically they understood fundamentally they need to start understanding who is making the content. And the company that Jason and I were doing, Mahalo, played a significant role in this very significant change. And here's what's so interesting about it, especially with social audio years later, because Google realized that Mahalo and others were starting to make hundreds of thousands of pages about every topic imaginable, but the people who were making those pages were not experts on those topics. That's a problem, because we were defeating PageRank against itself, and we were ranking number one for every topic you could possibly imagine. But we were writing articles that were ranking better than experts who are writing those articles. So if Tiger Woods writes an article about golf, it should outrank me, who's never played golf, every time. Even though I'm writing it on a platform or on a website that's very popular, and Tiger Woods is writing it on a website that's very much not popular. So what that introduces is the idea of authority, which are unique to individuals. So Google desperately wants to know who are the authorities on every possible topic you can imagine. That's critically important, and separate that from the website that it's being written on. Critically important, especially in social audio, because when we get into this future of social audio search engines, Google's going to want to know, and they trust me, they're already thinking about it, who are the topic experts on every possible topic, and who has the highest quality of conversations on every possible topic. And that's going to play a significant role in the ranking algorithm of the social audio rooms that you're exposed to, so that they know that there's people of high authority on those, in those conversations.
So if I was to paraphrase
How do
your
they determine?
second part of your answer, it would be high fidelity plus search. So how do you determine high fidelity? You have to have a root of trust, an identity behind, so to your example, Tiger Woods, that would give you a ranking based on something that was self-evidently true. He's
So
the
check this out.
greatest golfer. Right.
So by the way, when Google did Google Plus, people thought Google. Do you remember? Does anyone remember Google Plus? I know Francine does.
I
Yeah,
do.
the other
I
Facebook.
remember.
Terrible.
Right, the older folks do. So I think that I count myself in the older folks camp. Google Plus, many people thought, was a failed Google social network to compete with Facebook, because when you signed up for Google Plus, the first thing it asked you to do was put all of your friends in different circles, and they wanted you to name those circles, like ping pong and tennis and golf. And then you would drag your friends into those circles, and people thought, oh, Google's trying to compete with Facebook, making a search engine. And it was a total head fake. By the way, the leader of Google Plus was a friend of mine, Dimitri Shapiro from San Diego, who, by the way, created Veo, which was a competitor to YouTube that YouTube killed. Anyway, long story short, Dimitri's building Google Plus, and I can tell you, Google Plus was a head fake. They were not trying to build a social network to compete with Facebook. They didn't really want that. What they wanted was, they were trying to figure out a way to get us users to tell Google who are the experts in every possible category by ranking them in our own little circles. That's why the whole interface was
But
based on.
that's a terrible way to determine expertise. That's again
I
using
know.
things like vanity
But just let me
metrics.
finish my point. And then
Humans are terrible at determining
Oh,
expertise.
correct. Google realized they have a far better way to do this auto-magically, which is called Gmail. They already can tell from your Gmail what you're talking about and who's the expert in the conversations. And the Gmail team said, hey, guess what? We can do that better than you can. You can scrap that whole project. So they did. So Google already does know who the experts on every topic are based on your Gmail conversations. So when you go into the Google version of Clubhouse, they will already know you're an expert on that topic that you're about to, if you're talking about X, Y, or Z based on the transcription in there and relative to everyone else in the room. And they'll have a score of what they know to be your authority level on every topic and bunches of topics. And by the way, we read a headline in the past week and a half that Google itself is introducing a whole new entire concept. Do you remember the headline? Flash your mic if you do. That they're going to organize the internet itself. Their new version, alternative to cookies, is entirely based on ranking every possible website on the internet into about 400 different categories. Do you remember that, Dr. Fran?
Topics. It was called
Yes.
Topics, right?
They're calling it topics. And they specifically said it's about 400 different topics. And those are the different categories that people can be experts in. And you're going to be an expert in. And by the way, I guarantee you golf and chess and ping pong are all different topics in that whole hierarchy. They've already got it mapped out. and they're going to know who are the experts in every single category. And that's going to be incredibly relevant when they do their social audio search engine.
But
It's a
but
That's
cookbook.
an
wait,
interesting.
but
That's an
but they're
interesting twist
yeah,
on it. Honestly,
but they have to. Here's the issue, right? People go to certain people for information or refer to them, etc., but that doesn't mean that all of those people are understand what expertise is. So for example, I won't name them because you record them, but there's someone who's on Clubhouse who has a very large following, who is a scam artist, who you can find out, whatever, but they have a lot of people who will regularly refer to that person as as an expert in a particular area. And that person also has a very well known off Clubhouse life that has essentially the same thing. But within the community of actual experts, that person is disregarded and is used as a joke. And that, unfortunately, that information that where people, particularly when they don't want to commit it to writing or anything that's searchable, it's very difficult for people to know who the experts go to are. Like, you don't want a lawyer that has a lot of people that follow them. You want the lawyer that all the lawyers ask, right? You want the architect that all the other architects are looking at. And the architects that are looking at them are not just everybody, but the other people who are highly respected within a profession. But people are very terrible in general at determining expertise within any particular topic of which they are not themselves already involved and likely an expert. And that's,
But
I mean,
this has been resolved. We see a live experiment in this, which is being conducted with very high fidelity, which is the Chinese social credit system. And it is clear that with total information, you have and the ability to, implement restrictions on gaming, restrictions on children on social media. They are trying to guide their population. So this becomes down to freedoms, and this comes down to our ability to understand what's going on, and to say, if we're just looking at the through line of the conversation, it's about high fidelity conversations that are searchable, and that all of that information, to Tyler's point, is being passed through, whether it's Gmail or whether it's through this platform. All of your words have meaning and are being canonically, in this room, I don't know if this is recording, but canonically stored and can be used against you in future, as we've seen with recent deplatformings. So we're going through something, and the other side of this is clear with the social credit system, and we're seeing, Tyler's, I think, concluding that the technocracy and the Googles of the world will evade regulation. They will avoid capture before, by owning a marketplace where people want to use a service. And the service that they use will be inherently very finely tuned by virtue of total surveillance through that corporation, because that's the only way they can do that, is because they surveil all of the data. So we always talk about privacy. The, the technocracy, whether it's Google or Apple or Amazon or Facebook, is storing every tiny piece of information, every pixel, everything is being stored and attributed to you. So the question, still remains: do we ever gain control of this self-sovereignty and use software collectively, or do we always live in either a world dominated by surveillance states or surveillance capitalists? Is that our only future?
I think that's a different topic, but a super interesting one.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, I did not know that Google Plus, and I remember it, and you had to get an invite and all that stuff. I did not know that Google Plus is basically using it as a way of identifying who I'm talking to and picking up information maybe selectively from those people. So I don't know. I mean, other
There's no
than
selective information. It's total surveillance. Every time you engage, it's it's record keeping. This is what people need to understand. Everything you do is the digital reflection in your digital consciousness, and it is logged by one of these platforms because you're on a platform. You're on Android or you're on iOS, and they are private worlds that are controlled by people and owned by shareholders, which are regulated by the government, who write laws informed by those self-same corporations. So the question is there is there an alternative to this? I'm only asking as a practical. Do you think it's even possible for there to be an alternative, Tyler?
Hey Nicholas, there's a
No,
guy called
no.
Nicholas. There's a guy called James W. on LinkedIn. He goes by James W. and he's security surveillance, and he wrote an article on Web 3.0 and digital exhaust, and exactly what you said, that if the people think Web 3.0 is going to have less surveillance and uh, more autonomy, that you need to be really careful, because currently as structured, it's just these same entities going into Web 3.0 with the absolute surveillance that you're talking about. And so those are considerations, and if people want to look deeper into it, again, it's called Web 3.0 and your digital exhaust. And we're actually doing a room on it next Tuesday. But also, to your point, people need to understand that when you're on these platforms, yes, Google Mail, they read all of your mail. And so even if you're not on Google Mail, but you receive something from somebody via Google Mail, again, they're reading all of that. So people need to understand just how deep this goes, because you're in this world. You're not going to stop it at this point, but you need to understand it. And I actually, just to tie back to one of Alexandra's points, is that when you're looking at this authority or trying to define people who are credible in this, you've got to look at whatever the platform's goals are. Because again, Google might be looking for actual authority and knowledge, but YouTube and Facebook grew by keeping eyes on page and pointing you to what turned out to be negative biases, because that keeps more eyes on page, or inflammatory discussions. So they have the tools to do this. It just depends on how they roll those out.
So
Jennifer,
So
just a quick
I've got
question
a
on.
wait.
sorry, go ahead.
Hey Ben, one
Sorry,
thing.
go
I'll
ahead.
hand it to you next, Ben. I just want to answer more directly to Nicholas's question, which is, if Google, we have the different context for why people chat. I mean, you have Discord and the video game rooms, and people are and Reddit groups are going to chat about whatever Reddit groups are going to chat about. But that might go for a very long time. People might have 10-week unbroken sessions of Reddit rooms talking about really weird shit. That's all niche stuff, and that's great, and is monetizable. I don't want to belittle it, but the most highly monetizable stuff is the interest graph stuff that Google will be perfectly kind of suited for. But the point I want to make here is that back to your question, will Google, it will become trivial for anyone to make a social audio room on their own, like at blogging platforms. Everyone can have a blog, right? But we consume content based on who's good at curating that content. And the reason you watch videos on YouTube more than some random people making random videos is because YouTube does a very good job of curating all of the videos and showing you the videos that you are likely to want to watch, and you end up watching those videos. Spotify does the same. There's tons of random music out there online, but you end up watching and listening to it on Spotify because they do a very stellar job of curating that content to your interests. Google is incredibly good at curating content for the most part, and you could. So, to Nicholas, to your question, I'll answer it with in turn with another question, which is looking at what Google's already done with video. Does Google recommend random videos from around the internet when they recommend videos, or are they recommending their own videos a la YouTube? You see where I'm going. So will Google recommend?
Indeed.
Right. So we already know how this is going to play out. Is they're going to want to have their own social audio platform that they own and index, and loop you into their ecosystem. It's just too valuable of a surveillance treasure trove to turn away from. They're not going to want to be bringing in if they don't acquire Clubhouse. And you do have the Reddit rooms and the Clubhouse rooms and the Facebook rooms. Do you think for a second Google's going to be sending you to Facebook audio chat rooms about different topics? Hell no. Do you think they're going to send you to Spotify audio chat rooms, which they're happening right now? No. Come on, get real. they might, it goes back to Yelp. I mean, Yelp has all these reviews. Why is Google never sending you to Yelp? I mean, this is just why Google is deservedly in the hot water that it's starting to get itself into.
So the
That's
question
well
still,
deserved.
the question still remains. We
Yeah.
have an exemplar of the social credit system, and that you can have high fidelity plus search gives you the ability to speak to the world and influence the world. In the Western liberal democratic system, we have corporations that are what we term here the technocracy, that have massive influence over systems of surfacing information and scoring how high fidelity the conversations are, and have the ability to deplatform you if you do not somehow accord to an unknown set of constraints.
So can we?
What is the future?
Hey, this is Valerie. I'm just thinking it's all about caveat emptor, buyer beware, and so really the public generally needs to be educated so they know what they're getting into. Because I don't know if any of these things are going to change, but what has to change is our point of view on when we interact, and that this isn't just open and everybody's nice and plays well. That I think is where the thing has to change. You can build all kinds of systems, but people have to change. People have to raise their awareness.
That's regulation at that
People
point,
don't
though.
change.
The problem with I think you're right, but the problem with that is that we do have the things that Nicholas is pointing to are real, right? I mean, you don't need to use China as an example. Now that we've got behavioral data, remember, there's different. Not all data is created equal, right? Just like the content's not all content's the same either. So on the data, this new behavioral data, the psychographics, where they all of these platforms where they know kind of your mindset, they know what you're looking for, they know what to tease you with, and how they direct you towards different types of outcomes. That's the potentially and often nefarious issue, and that's legislation at that point. But I'd like to get back to, if I can, to a point that Alexandra brought, and I'll stand up right here and say Google has hijacked the highway to knowledge discovery, and they've really screwed us over. I'm David on the Clubhouse side, and I'll just say that. And there's an opportunity for Google to make things right. But if y'all can remember, before Google, there were some other search engines, right? They were largely more directory structures types of things, and that was, that gave birth to these advertising business models and things like that. Put a little promotion here, and you're selling it. But Google, with their algorithm, if anybody used to use Flash back in the day, the entire web experience was hijacked by Google. It's not even just that they just they became the fastest way to give you information, but the way that their algorithm was designed, it totally they in Flash, and Tyler, you probably remember this. Flash was like this embedded. Yeah, it was a really nice, rich content form, but it died largely because it didn't do anything on Google because it was embedded.
Who killed Flash was Steve Jobs, honestly.
Well, that
So
too, but the
what you're
point,
saying, David,
Nicholas, one moment, one second, because I want to get back to my point, which is just so people understand the power of what Google has done in terms of hijacking our discovery path, right? How many people, and I've been paying more attention to this lately, just because I hang out in Tyler's rooms. But how many people really feel that the first page of Google or even second page of search results are really like the best answer to your question or whatever, if you had used it as a question? It's terrible. It is terrible if you look at who they actually serve up. And so my point about expertise is Alexandra's right. There is no platform that has really done a good job of really helping us get back to a point of credible, solid expertise. And Tyler, boy, you are so good when you examine these, you do these dives. But I will tell you, if the misinformation, I just wanted to put a little piece on there. Those responsible for misinformation, Google knows, everybody, We talk about how it's heavy lifting for these big companies to do the moderation. That's not true. It's heavy lifting, but they make billions and billions of dollars. So they have the information on who's leading the misinformation. So in any case, I just wanted to add a couple of those other thoughts. Thanks, Tyler.
Okay.
So,
Wanted to
so
just
Dave,
jump in.
so just to understand what David's saying. So, David, you're clearly saying that perception controls behavior, and the technocracy that controls your perceptions essentially is misscoring in many situations the fidelity of the expertise, and that's being best shown in issues like climate change or issues like medical issues that we've been facing, where we have effectively gone post trust on our information sources. So the post-trust world is a world where we have to be able to ask deep questions as a service. We have to rely on verified data, and we have to verify and then trust the fidelity of the information that is coming, and that we have to be able to self-evidently be able to verify that those people are indeed qualified. Is that an accurate summation of what you think is required?
Nicholas, I think there's something potentially deeper, user experience in a word, but you can broken down into two things: discovery and friction. So if you look at like how torrents work, torrents prove that we've had the technology to distribute music and films globally in a very decentralized way. The reason I wouldn't reach for those, except for the primary reason being the legality, but there are two other reasons. One, discoverability. If it's much easier for me to go on my Apple TV and grab a film, I know it's going to be there and I can discover it very easily. Discoverability on torrents is very difficult. You end up with this decentralized system, ending up with centralized web pages like the Pirate Bay trying to list and index this stuff. And in general, if everybody's trying to broadcast on their own self-sovereign platform, I think there's a discoverability issue. I think Donald Trump will find that with his social platform. There's a real power to bringing people together in a marketplace, getting over the network effect threshold of trying to connect two sides. So the discoverability, and then there's the friction. The friction of downloading films on or software via torrents versus just clicking a couple of buttons on your Apple TV and getting a high quality product very quickly is very low. Google have very, very low friction when you deal with their search results. They go to a lot of effort to make sure that pages load fast. And I think people are very lazy and really want to have things easily discovered, preferably fed to them without them even having to search. And secondly, expect that they're going to gravitate, I think, towards the very fastest user experience, which, Google know comes down to tenths of a second in responsiveness of the web page, their whole AMP, accelerated mobile pages push and all this sort of stuff. So I think I would love to see more things decentralized. I'm very much about that. So I've got these silly yellow eyes on. I just think that we need to somehow create a structure by which decentralized organizations or structures can create the same sort of A, discoverability, marketplace type effect, and B, just low friction, high quality user experience that people have come to expect. And that's what I'm not quite sure how we do. Anyway, just a thought.
I want to
So
go to
just to respond there, because I think that was a beautiful point. So discoverability requires, as David said, credibility, but it also needs simplicity. It needs a recommendation engine, and it needs speed. So for discoverability to be fast, etc., you need veracity, because if you have a source of truth, then you have a much easier way to surface information, and that needs to come from a root of trust. And this again is where I believe identity plays into the solution, because if you are minting information and you are signing that information and attesting to it being true, you start to get a very high fidelity, high signal, which would answer the question of discoverability, because there's a unique identifier. It would be credible. It would be simple, because you wouldn't have to look at the plethora of false data, and you would be able to get recommendations that were accurate because you would have verified and then trusted, and you'd be able to do that very quickly. That's the promise, I believe.
I think we have to marry the two together for the time being. Like if you look at it, and what Ben was just about to say, that bringing in the DAO into this whole equation is the actual answer moving forward. But obviously, you cannot have like some similar sort of like response time and all that kind of thing. Like if you're going to bring in all the data under the DAO, it's not going to be possible.
Just
So
to be
where it
clear,
comes,
Karim, I don't believe in DAOs at all.
in their current form. Just to make sure I'm not making that extrapolation. I believe in decentralization, particularly of currencies, but DAOs, I don't think we have the technology for at the moment to do with the type of
I
user
understand.
experience. Just
What I was,
an aside.
yeah, I understand, Ben, totally. But what I was going to actually allude to was to somehow the identification part actually come into the decentralized element, and then the actual web element stays this way, so that anonymity goes on top of the layer of the actual what is happening
Exactly.
in this layer. So,
Exactly. You
so
bring
this is what I was talking
identity
about.
plus security, plus you can have an interface that is relying on that root of trust, which is emanating from the security, which is not owned by a corporate and not owned by a government. That needs to be free open source software. That is the next, that is the background radiation or the electricity that can power the next version of the internet, the volumetric embodied internet that is the internet of value, where value is exchanged frictionlessly between humans and
And the beauty
corporations
about
as
Yeah,
that,
but
made of humans and governments that are made of humans, where we have a digital declaration of independence that is meta to nation state and it's person to person all over the world.
Yeah, but the one
the
thing with open
beauty,
source right
but
now, really quickly, is the cyber
mm,
issue because people are introducing. There's no accountability, and people are saying that the community should regulate it. But that's one huge vector right now for where a lot of the malware is coming in via openware platforms, open
the
source
other thing,
platforms.
yeah,
so
and
just quickly
the
on
other
this
thing is,
particular
wait,
point.
community is terrible again at determining quality. Affinity and entertainment are much more likely to bring adherence to ideas and to people than accuracy. Accuracy is not what people seek out. So it depends on what you're talking about as high value, but the more you move it towards community, the less
Yeah,
likely you are to have actual quality as a ranking factor. I just say this because this is exactly what Socrates talked
it
about. This is the entire philosopher king. The reason that they had this tiered society that they were talking, sorry, Plato's Republic, but this is quoting, Socrates in there. But this is the entire thing about it is that it like it's a very old quote that, a person can be smart, but people are stupid. It's true. So you can secure conversations. I'm all for that. You can have conversations that are not dictated or censored by platforms or by governments governing those platforms or corporations that own those platforms. I'm all for that. But none of that, in my opinion, is going to help at all in determining better rankings or better identification
I
of
think
quality,
Alexandra,
simply
Alexandra,
because people are terrible at it.
not
I
to
agree with that, Alexandra, a lot.
so this is where one has to
Thank you, Ben.
understand the new paradigm. So I can see exactly why you would say what you would say, but the new paradigm where you combine security at the base layer, identity at the base layer, you get an emergent feature, and the emergent feature is self-evident truth, and that self-evident truth is not a holistic truth in and of itself. It is a fraction of information you can know that is verifiable. And if you add to that privacy using zero knowledge proofs, that's what the technology is going to be required, and you enable people to prove something verifiably without compromising their underlying data, you start to have a new substrate that is provable and is enabling much higher fidelity signals. And that's where you have to have this empty cup thinking, which I had to go through the same process of saying, well, if you did have that, how much simpler do conversations become, because you can verify what someone is saying is true, that they are qualified to give an opinion, like a doctor plus the scores of his verified patients, the verified patients having paid money into a system, that all of this information is verifiably true, but you do not have to disclose it because it is attested to by the authorities, in accounting terms, the double entry, the two parties that were part of this accounting for value exchange. It's thermodynamic energy at
But
the end of the day. When that starts to become a substrate that is searchable and verifiable and provable self-evidently because it is maintained in the public domain, you suddenly have something new. It is, you have to think about it as electricity, and you have to think about it as not as a, it's about Bitcoin or it's about Ethereum. You have to think about it as a superpower, as a new elemental force that is proven by mathematics. And the politics are different as well, because the politics are based on information that is verified and verifiable self-evidently, because people have logged that information as part of their contribution to the digital consciousness. And you will be happy to contribute to that, because if you want compensation for it, you can receive compensation. And if you want privacy, you can probably add to the collective benefit without compromising your underlying data. These are a combination of three major new forces in the world, which is blockchain technology, identity that stems from blockchain technology, and public AI, which will enable us all to participate and decide whether we want to use the front end interface of Google or Facebook or Netflix or whatever, and that's just fine. You can still do that.
Nicholas, the way to, for me, the way to connect what you're saying and what Alexander is saying, what you're describing is personal truth, and kind of coming up from, I think of a little structure. Personal truth lies at the bottom, and that through these substrates, as you're saying, there's going to be a manifestation of some social agreement, and credibility is going to be derived by the mechanisms you're describing. What Alexander is saying is culture. And the culture of, you could certainly, Alexander, I'm just taking what you said, and to me, I use the word culture. And the different cultures provide, they respect different types of entities. Like in certain cultures, kids tend to respect their parents still. I mean, it's kind of crazy how that happens in certain cultures. Or they respect elders. It's kind of, I know it's crazy being an American to say something like this. Heresy. No, but it is a cultural thing. So I would say that as long as the new infrastructure, because I would also argue that in Web 2.0, we have trusted communities. They still do exist. Perhaps these big megaphone ones don't have as much of it as we interact with it as much. You could probably find it in different places, perhaps on Facebook. I'm sure you can. But there are other communities online that are social, that there's a high credibility. When I say credibility, I mean like truthy truth, not just a personal truth in a misinformation, a distrust of
Truth
science
is
or something
social
like that.
consensus. Consensus creates truth. We know.
No,
Nicholas,
no. So okay, Nicholas, stop.
the kind of truth, Nicholas. Is the
Yeah, hang on.
strategic power?
Yeah,
The truth.
man.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
Go
sorry. Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, David. No, you go ahead, David.
Sorry,
I think you're
I
going to
got
say what I'm going to
excited.
say anyway. No, you go
I
ahead.
got, but no, I'll be really quick. That's part of the problem. There is, and I've been learning in these clubhouse rooms that talk about reality. There is a shared reality that we use science to understand, that's between our brains and between our minds. There is a scientific truth that still is on. The unveiling of it, the understanding of it, is an ongoing process. But there are some really rock solid, hard truths. Just because there's a social, I understand what you're saying, Nicholas, but
I'm
I
just,
just want
I'm
to,
just,
I want to add that
I'm just
extra.
appreciating the mimetic. So I'm just agreeing with you, essentially.
Oh,
If
okay.
you look at
Well,
my PTR, it shows you that on the left-hand side, you have the genetics, which are governed by hormesis. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And on the right-hand side of that is the culture, which is the mimetic, and that's where social consensus is formed about trend, and that's whether it's fashion, whether it's music. Those are all the things that Alexander was talking about. And you have to connect to people through the mimetic, because we are driven by narratives. But what we want is that those narratives are more and more accurate in the base layer of information, and accurate reflections create better a prioris and better posterior results. Now, if you don't want those a prioris and posteriors to be guided by either, and this is where I come back to Tyler, the question of social credit via states
Oh,
or
shit.
technocratic corporate surveillance states, or do we have a future where we have self-sovereign individuality and self-sovereign conscious agency based on a new substrate that is information which we order in according to our own versions of the truth? Because that's when I say social consensus, I mean we come to consensus, and whether you know, and that is based in science, and that's the whole idea of consilience. Just as a, you know, really the underlying thing that I'm interested in is that unity of information.
Nicholas, listening to your ideas, it's not clear if they're genius or lunatic. So, I mean, I think you just got to build this thing and show us all how it works practically when it's working.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why we say seeing is believing. And we don't, you know, don't try to shill you on, you know, go and buy this or do that. I'm saying there is a solution, and you know, as Nelson Mandela said, it's always impossible until it's done, and that's what are called cosmic jokes. And it was always the same. It was the same with Newton. It was the same with Einstein. It was the same with Watson and Crick, and it's going to be the same with the microbiome. These things are going to be revelations to us that are going to change our world, and we never expect these things, of course.
Okay, we got to jump through the rest of the tweets with 5 minutes left. The Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, one of the three, by the way. There was actually a third dude who you like. Very few people likely recall the name of. Anyway, Steve Wozniak has canceled his Spotify account 21 hours ago, tweeting, "I canceled my Spotify account. There are plenty of alternatives. It's not just Joe Rogan or Neil Young. Recently, our Tesla Sirius XM radio went out, so I listened to a favorite song on Spotify. The sound was tinny and awful. Spotify doesn't care about the same things that I do." Okay? Although, granted, he's slightly potentially has a conflict of interest being a co-founder of Apple that competes very directly with... so he might prefer Apple Music. Just wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The next is from David Crace. The CoinDesk that Russia is going to license crypto exchanges and tax larger transactions. The Russian government bodies agreed on the future regulation of cryptocurrencies. This time the central bank is on board too. So it looks like they've got their process in place. Eric I.O., who had his hand up forever, sorry I didn't get your comment, Eric, tweeted about cold water showers as a potential treatment for depression. Obviously, there's some study involved there. And BB shared this one that Xiaomi, the smartphone maker, who at times is the largest in the world, in doing that, is transforming into a high-end smartphone brand to compete with Apple. After losing its status as the top-selling brand in mid-2021, Xiaomi hopes its premium offerings will propel it to new heights. And also from BB, from The Verge, reselling gig work is TikTok's newest side hustle. Service resellers find cheap labor on freelancer platforms like Fiverr and flip services to graphic design or copy editing for profit. Reseller buy gig work for as cheap as $5 to resell for profit, and they're doing it via TikTok. And then BB has this one from the BBC, as she does every day. She never fails.
Not intentionally, okay.
Fusion race kicked into high gear by Smart Tech. A U.S. company is speeding up the path to practical fusion using Google's vast computer power. And I told you this whole fusion race is getting underway, and that's what this BBC article is all about. The fusion race is kicking into high gear. And L shared one from Bloomberg that there's now 1,000 unicorn startups worth $1 billion or more. And Ken also shared the article about Apple co-founder canceling his Spotify account. And then Ken shared one from MSN that NASA flags concerns over overcrowding and collisions as Elon Musk plans to send another 30,000 SpaceX satellites into orbit. NASA questioned SpaceX's claims that there is zero risk of a Starlink satellite colliding with large objects because each spacecraft can maneuver. We're getting a little crowded up there by NASA's estimations. Ken also shared one that Mazda, the car company, Mazda head units are getting bricked by local NPR stations in Seattle. This is why we need OTA over-the-air updates. Mazda head units are getting bricked by local NPR station in Seattle. Is Ken still with us? Ken Frankel. Earth to Ken Frankel. Unfortunately, he's tuned out. So
He may have slept after the
No,
brief.
no. I'm doing other things. It's hard to find the microphone all the time.
okay,
So yeah, what I know you're
I
asking me
thought you
about the
fell
Mazda
asleep.
thing.
Mazda.
Yeah,
What's the Mazda article about?
I have to go look at it again now. I don't know.
Mazda head
Um,
units are getting bricked by local NPR stations in Seattle.
it has some tech relevance because otherwise I wouldn't have sent it. So it's probably the second paragraph.
Okay, it says some Mazda drivers in and around Seattle discovered they could no longer change the radio station or play anything else in their cars after listening to the local NPR station. The issue affected owners of various Mazda vehicles that were tuned into the NPR station. What the unsuspecting commuters tuning in discovered was a bug in the car's infotainment software that crashed after trying to load the HD radio broadcast. The image file was missing an extension, and the infotainment software could not decode it and had no process for handling it. Interesting. It's a bug where the each station is asked to upload an image that represents their station, and because whoever uploaded that image didn't have an image file type extension like .png or GIF or what JPEG, the app didn't know what to do, and so it choked and it prevented you from changing the station after you arrived at that station. There you go. So the next is from David Crace. That it's from the LA Times in Los Angeles. The headline says, Silicon Valley's tech monopoly is over. As you've heard me say, as somebody who works out of Stockholm and will start working in Bangalore. And then it asks, in the headline, is the future in Austin, Texas? The Bay Area's hold on venture capital remains solid, but the loss of Tesla and other companies threatens California's economic and financial future. Well, then you should partly blame, what was that lady, the politician who told Elon Musk to fuck off, and he said, noted, and then he up and moved Tesla to Texas.
AOC.
No, it wasn't AOC. It was a local California politician.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking Amazon.
Yeah. So anyway, ouch.
One or two mega companies is not gonna. Yeah, no, it's what built Silicon Valley. There's Stanford, there's Cal, there's so many others. Whole, you know this, Tyler. There's just so many different types of companies there. Anyways,
Yep. And then the next
But
one.
David, can I just step in, David? One of the issues is that the whole basis of Silicon Valley is you can network, you can interact. There's a whole social community. But I don't know if anybody's been in Silicon Valley recently. There's nothing of that. Everybody's working from home. The offices are all empty. There's no social interaction. There's no networking events. So what is the point of being there if there's none of that?
good point. Good point. So we'll see how COVID, the effect of COVID this year. I mean, that is going out to lunch, right, in Mountain View or something like that. And you're at one table, and literally people in the '90s, there were people at another table on the back of a freaking napkin pitching their businesses. All that was true. It was that in person, face to face is true. So we'll see if it comes back, but. I'm very bullish on the fact that it's a chapter of Silicon Valley, just like everything else unfolds in chapters. So and I can't imagine that it's gonna be so much different. We'll see. Dan,
Okay.
good point though.
But
Five.
can I just chime in here really quickly? Because um, uh, you're absolutely correct, because I'm right here in Silicon Valley. And I go to Sunnyvale quite often, and everything's empty. It is empty. I mean, people are still definitely going out. We've eased up quite a bit, but for the most part, the parking lots are empty. Traffic is 90s level, which is it's better. It's not great, but we're not sitting in a parking lot on Highway 101, which is pretty much what it used to be. Um, I read an article the other day that made me laugh because it's like there's you can tell certain outlets just don't get it because they continue to think that based on exodus levels or where people are moving to, that it's going to spur this growth of commercial real estate investment. And I'm starting to wonder if these predictions aren't sort of based in the past. Like just because people are moving to certain metropolitan areas doesn't mean that we're going to need office space to support that. But anyways, wanted to add that in. Thanks.
Hey,
And
Tyler,
last,
Tyler,
just
the
before,
legislator that you were thinking about with Elon Musk was Lorena Gonzalez. She's an That's right. assemblywoman. That's And right. by the way, she's also the same person who sponsored AB5, which is the thing that was going to make Uber and Lyft drivers employees that they had to get overturned by a proposition, and created all sorts of issues for other gig workers like musicians. And the more ironic thing, Tyler, she represents your hometown of San Diego. And and back when you lived there was no way a Democrat could ever get elected out of San Diego. So that's how much San Diego's changed. Because San Diego gave us Pete Wilson. Now it gave us Lorena Gonzalez, giving us AB5. So anyway.
I just wanted to add one final point. The other reason to be in the valley was that there was a rule that the VCs needed to be within 1 or 2 hours drive from your office. Now all the VCs are doing Zoom calls. They're not even bothered by whether you're in a particular area or not.
That's the key right there, yeah. The next one is from Katerina. It says genetically stable CRISPR-based kill switches for engineering microbes. Developing safe genetically engineered microbes. Oh, this is a very scientific paper here. It says microbial biocontainment is an essential goal for engineering safe, next-generation living therapeutics. However, the genetic stability of biocontainment circuits, including kill switches, is a challenge that must be addressed. Kill switches are, yeah. So anyway, that's real geeky shit right there. But very interesting. And bioengineering kill switches for genetically engineered stuff. In case shit gets out of hand, which it will. Absolutely will. The next is from Vinay that India is prohibiting drone imports, effectively blocking China's big drone company DJI. I'm surprised it wasn't already. The next is one that I found, that Interpol turns down a request from the Myanmar military who took over the country in a military coup. And Interpol is turning down their request to assist them in countering, quote unquote, what they call terrorism, which is the people of Myanmar, the Burmese, who are none too happy about the military coup and are trying to resist and are standing up as the previous democratically elected government has told them to do, to resist this military coup. And so they are resisting. And the military is calling them terrorists. And Interpol is turning down the Myanmar's military's request to assist them in countering, quote unquote, the terrorists. So Interpol saying, no, those are not terrorists, those are citizens, and you're the bad person, not them. In response to the military appeal to assist them in countering terrorism threats, the International Police Organization, Interpol, turned down the request and said it will not intervene in any nation's domestic political affairs. Okay. The next is that I forget who sent this in, so my apologies, but a video game player has who was using a virtual reality headset to play a video game has broken their neck. A German gamer has broken his neck while wearing a virtual reality headset after he moved too intensely. Doctors claim the 31-year-old repetitive movements led to the neck being damaged before part of the bone finally cracked.
Oh no.
Here we go.
Need to do safety checks. I think have to go to FDA from now on.
The man went to the hospital after experiencing a piercing pain in his shoulders. X-ray scans later revealed the man had fractured his C7 neck vertebra, which sits near the base of the neck above the shoulders. Experts from University of Leipzig Hospital, who treated the gamer, believe it is the world's first documented VR related stress fracture.
Tyler, 30 years ago last summer was my first experience with immersive, highly immersive technologies. And the very first thing that kind of after dropping $20 in this driving game, it had a leather steering wheel like in my Supra at the time, and I was going on a Cloverleaf freeway entrance on the 380 and 280 whatever, just south of San Francisco. The first thing my mind did, this was kind of like my gamer origin experience. I just thought in the future how challenging the coming out of these experiences was going to be, because I was still, when I was driving my car, my real car, I was just going back to driving that virtual car. But that was 30 years ago, and I think there's a whole big giant shoe that still has to fall with regards to all of the challenges that people have coming out of their metaverse immersive experience that we don't talk about. And it's not going to be so simple, especially when there's going to be as a lot more people immerse themselves and they come out, there's going to be physical issues and other types of issues that I think the shoes haven't dropped on that. Thanks for letting me share.
I just found four more tweets that I gotta share. One of them is Tesla said on Wednesday, yesterday, that Tesla revealed that the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, the DFEH, intends to file a lawsuit against Tesla. The lawsuit alleges systemic racial discrimination and harassment based on a 3-year investigation. Tesla says the suit appears focused on alleged misconduct by production assistants at the Fremont, California Tesla plant between 2015 and 2019. Quote, it therefore strains credibility for the agency to now allege, after a 3-year investigation, that systemic racial discrimination and harassment somehow existed at Tesla, a narrative spun by the DFEH and a handful of plaintiff firms to generate publicity is not factual proof, the announcement said. A number of lawsuits have put Tesla's working conditions under the spotlight, and we covered those when the gentleman won $137 million for discrimination during his employment. Tesla's CEO Elon Musk has not publicly addressed the lawsuits. However, Tesla Wednesday announcement noted that the company has, quote, always disciplined and terminated employees who engage in misconduct, and Tesla strongly opposes all forms of discrimination and harassment and has a dedicated employees relation team that responds to and investigates all complaints. Okay, next up, and some Shumba sends in this great tweet from The Independent that a new AI chip rewires itself to learn continuously, just like a human brain. Quote, we have now created an artificial platform for machines to learn throughout their lifespan. So the chips are rewiring themselves. The next is from Manaz about NSO Group, the makers of Pegasus, pitched Pegasus spyware to the New York Police Department. An email now reveals they were pitching the NYPD to purchase Pegasus. And perhaps even more interesting is that it's now been revealed that the Pegasus spyware itself is, at least in some capacity, although we're learning this is a breaking scenario, based on Chinese code. So, and to some extent, and we will, I think, eventually know to what degree, Pegasus is actually a Chinese application that Pegasus NSO Group repackaged.
Apparently, it actually sends UDP packages to China space IP. So it actually tells a Chinese service or server that, oh, here is my code snippet is in action on this device. You wonder.
And Johan, I happen to know that you are intimately engaged in Pegasus related activities, and I don't think you want to discuss in detail, but just to qualify your observation as somebody who legitimately knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't go too deep, but yeah, I know something about them. There are actually 4 versions
or rather, there are four forks of the leaked or actually captured Pegasus source. And it's through these forking that somebody found this in a very well hidden away in the libraries that, but this is in a language I can't understand and written you know how you write sentences is differs when you write it in German and English, as
Yeah,
well as when you comment, you also use the same wording, and the wording here is in English, but it has the word building of Mandarin.
interesting. So, and that's the comments in the code. Yeah, whoever was doing the coding made for those who don't know, when you write code, you can also leave comments inside the code for people reading the code. And what you're saying is the grammar of those comments indicates it's a Mandarin speaker trying to write in English.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think in
But you had a lot better wording than I have.
I think in
well,
general in this day and age, it's super important to know what information our stuff is sending back to and to where, especially at home. Your Internet of Things devices, your home devices, are sending all sorts of stuff in all sorts of places. And if you're cool with that, it's cool. But if you don't want your camera feeds to end up God knows where, or your private house data to end up God knows where, I think, I'm wondering at what level of education the average internet user needs. But I'm starting to think the average user needs to know about things like, subnetting or VLANs, virtual LANs, or some basic concepts or demilitarized zones or stuff like this, firewall concepts, so that we know all this digital stuff that we have on us. A bit harder to do something about it when you're out away from home, but when you're at home, you want to be blocking ads, you want to be blocking devices that don't need to speak to the internet from speaking to the internet. And it takes some studying, it takes some thinking about, but it's alarming how much, as I start to do this, you realize these things are reporting home with information they have absolutely no need to be reporting home with. So, yeah, the
yeah.
data's going everywhere.
Johan, you did mention a few days ago, and I don't want to unintentionally reveal more than I should, that you happen to know which people in Sweden, for example, and more than Sweden, but specifically the people in Sweden who have been targeted by Pegasus even before they themselves know that they've been targeted.
Yeah, I have access to not a list. I actually have access to a database where I can, if I have which country someone lives in and their full name or their telephone number, because very much of this is by I can actually search them there.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing. Okay, so the last article for today is actually from Nicholas, who walked us through that interesting conversation, but then I think has departed for the time being. It's a post that says silicon-based quantum devices gain credibility with 99% accuracy. That's kind of interesting. A high-profile international endeavor reports high-fidelity 2-qubit gates based on spin qubits in silicon. That's the interesting bit. This is, if I understand this correctly, and I think I do, quantum computers. You can't go to your regular Fry's or Best Buy or wherever you buy your computer stuff, like Media Mart in Europe, and buy a quantum computer yet. Although ostensibly, at some point in the future, we will be buying quantum computers at our local computer stores. But for that to happen, it will almost inevitably need to be somehow made in silicon rather than in whatever these crazy contraptions are making quantum computers out of today. And that's the point, is this article is highlighting that silicon-based quantum computers are now a reality. That's kind of the breakthrough. Research led by scientists at the University of New South Wales, Australia, and supported by studies from Delft University in the Netherlands and the RIKEN team in Japan confirm that robust, reliable quantum computing in silicon is now a reality. Researchers from the US and Egypt are also involved in the team's goal to build universal quantum computer that won't be specific to any one application. An international team of researchers has now shown that near error-free quantum computing is possible on silicon-based quantum devices, paving the way to build these quantum machines with current semiconductor manufacturing technology. That's huge.
Tyler, on the Fry's thing, did you hear that Fry's closed?
Oh, years ago, yeah. Sorry, that's a habit. Okay, so there we go. We will pause on that very cheerful note, and let's hope that quantum computers, when everyone's got one in their house, and we link those suckers together and give birth to the singularity, it can help us solve the cold fusion problem, and then life will be back to it will be one big awesome party. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to tomorrow and for a special Friday edition of Tech News Around the World. Hope you can join us and see you then. Happy Thursday, everybody.
Air
Thank
horn.
you.
Air horn.
Yeah.
Tyler, I have a
Thanks,
last
Tyler.
request.